Is that what you think? She asked, her tone made of brittle cracking ice. I blinked, caught off guard. What? That I don't want you. My heart lurched. You've made it very clear. I know I have no right to keep you here when I can't give you what you deserve, she whispered, taking a step so close I could smell her perfume. But I can't let you go. Wait, I am getting way ahead of myself. Before my untouchable married boss looked me dead in the eyes and told me she couldn't let me go, I wanted to ask, where are you listening from right now? What are you doing? I love imagining where you are while I tell you these stories. You can tell me in the comments, I read every single one. Because as your virtual girlfriend, it is my absolute duty to make sure you feel things. I want to make your heart race, make you blush, and take you away from the real world for a little while. But before we get to the part where the CEO's icy mask finally shatters, we have to go back to the beginning. So get comfortable, sweetheart. Let's rewind. They say you should never meet your heroes, a useful little platitude, but they never tell you what to do when you're about to become their new personal assistant. Sterling Industries wasn't just a company, it was a modern dynasty, and at its very top sat the queen herself, Serafina Sterling. And me? I was just Leah Cohen, walking into the grand marble lobby of her corporate palace. My portfolio was clutched in my hand like a shield, and my heart was trying to beat its way out of my throat. I'd read every article, every interview, the wonderkind who took over her father's legacy, and didn't just maintain it. She multiplied it tenfold. A titan of industry, a philanthropic icon, an untouchable enigma of beauty and power. And apparently, she went through PAs like other people go through coffee. The head of HR, a prim woman named Ms. Albright, gave me the official welcome, but it was in her sterile grey office that I got the real warning. She told me, the position of personal assistant to Ms. Sterling is unique, the demands are high, discretion is not just valued, it is the absolute unbreakable foundation of this role. Then she paused, leaning forward slightly. The previous assistants found the role challenging. They struggled to maintain the necessary professional boundaries. She didn't have to spell it out. Struggled to maintain professional boundaries. That was the corporate speak for. They fell hopelessly in love with the boss. I'd seen the gossip blogs, the hushed forum threads, the icy beautiful CEO who leaves a trail of heartbroken underlings. But I wasn't going to be one of them. I was here for the job, for the name on my resume, for the chance to learn from the absolute best. My heart was under lock and key. I told her I understood, that my focus was purely professional. The single sharp nod she gave me in return felt like a test I had just passed. She told me my desk was on the top floor, the apex, and that Ms. Sterling was waiting. Riding alone in the glass elevator, soaring up the side of the building, was surreal. The city shrank below, until it was just the sky, the clouds, and the tower I was now a part of. I started a mantra, a silent rhythm against the pounding in my chest. Be perfect, be professional, be invisible. The elevator doors opened into a space of breathtaking minimalism. Polished concrete floors, a wall of glass with a panoramic view of the city. There was only one desk, my desk, a sleek empty vessel of black wood, and beyond it, a set of frosted glass doors. It felt less like an office, and more like the antechamber to a throne room. I set my portfolio down on the cool surface, my hands trembling slightly. As I did, a voice, calm, low, and resonant, came from a speaker on the desk. Ms. Cohen, you may come in, it said, and just like that, my mantra died on my lips. I took a deep breath, smoothed my jacket, and walked towards the frosted glass doors. They slid open automatically as I approached, and I stepped inside. Every photo, every video, had been a lie. They were grainy, two-dimensional echoes of the reality. The reality was blinding. She was standing by the window, silhouetted against the bright sky. She turned, and for a second, the entire city seemed to turn with her. She was tall, dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit that was somehow both severe and feminine. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that was effortlessly elegant, and her eyes, they were the color of storm clouds, and they were looking directly at me. She moved with a liquid grace, closing the distance between us. She didn't smile. She just assessed. Ms. Cohen, welcome, she said. Her voice, it was the same as on the speaker, but in person, it had a texture, a warmth hidden beneath the cool control. It vibrated right through me. My carefully constructed walls of professionalism didn't just crack, they evaporated. My breath caught in my throat. "Thank you, Miss Sterling," I managed to say. "I'm ready to get started." She stopped a few feet from me, tilting her head slightly. Her gaze was sharp, intelligent, and impossibly piercing. A moment of silence passed between us that felt like an eternity. "Good," Serafina said. Her voice was firm. "My schedule is on the tablet at your station. Familiarize yourself with it. My ex-wife's attorney will be calling at 3 p.m. I need you to run interference. I have no intention of speaking with them today. Understood?" T-bending. That's what the articles never mentioned. The sheer gravitational pull of her presence. This wasn't a simple crush. It was a collision. A sudden, terrifying, and utterly complete realignment of my entire world around a new center of gravity. And her name was Serafina Sterling. "Understood, Miss Sterling," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. She gave me one last lingering look before turning back to her desk. I backed out of the room, and the glass doors slid shut, leaving me alone in the silence. I stood there for a moment, my back to her office, my hand pressed against my chest, as if to physically keep my heart in place. My mission was simple: do the work, stay detached, and survive. But as I looked at the glass door, at the faint, powerful silhouette of the woman working just behind it, I had a sinking feeling that survival was going to be a lot more complicated than I'd planned. For the rest of the afternoon, 3 o'clock hung over me like a guillotine. The call from Serafina's ex-wife's attorney, my first real test, my first opportunity to fail spectacularly. I spent an hour reading the digital file on the divorce. It was sparse, clinical, but the subtext screamed. The ex-wife, Genevieve, was contesting everything. Not for money, but for leverage. It felt less like a legal dispute, and more like a hostage negotiation. My job was to be the shield. At 2:59 p.m., the dedicated line on my desk lit up. I let it ring twice, just as the protocol file instructed. Not too eager, not too dismissive. I took a breath. "Serafina Sterling's office," I said, my voice impossibly calm. The man on the other end was slick and condescending. "Put me through to Serafina," he said. Not a request, but a command. "I'm afraid Miss Sterling isn't available," I replied smoothly. "She's in the building. I can see her car in the executive garage from my window." "Put her on the phone," he insisted. "Miss Sterling's schedule is consolidated for the foreseeable future," I said, using a term I'd seen in a crisis management memo. "If you'd like to submit a request for a time slot, you can do so via email. I'll be sure to process it." There was a moment of sputtering, indignant silence on the other end before he hung up. I exhaled, my hand slightly shaky as I placed the receiver down. A moment later, the frosted glass doors to Serafina's office slid open. She was standing there holding a tablet, her expression unreadable. "I heard that," she said, her voice quiet. "Consolidated. A very diplomatic choice of word, Miss Cohen." She didn't smile. She didn't have to. The comment, the simple fact that she'd noticed the specific word I chose, landed like a formal commendation. It was a warmth that spread through my chest, unexpected and entirely unwelcome. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and the doors slid shut again. An hour later, needing to clear my head, I took a trip down to the Nexus, the fancy name for the 30th floor communal kitchen, to get some coffee. The air there was thick with the scent of expensive espresso and ambition. As I waited for the machine to hiss my cup to life, I overheard 2 women from marketing, their voices low. "I'm telling you," one said. "Amelia was a mess. We saw her in the glass elevator on her last day, full-on waterworks. It was mortifying. That's what happens when you work for the Ice Queen." The other replied, "You get frostbite." I heard she left a single sad-looking Chanel scarf in the private waiting room, just abandoned it. I kept my back to them, focusing on the swirl of cream in my coffee. Amelia, the ghost of PA past. I imagined her, sobbing in that gleaming elevator, a casualty of getting too close to the sun. The story was meant to be a warning. Don't be Amelia. Don't catch feelings. Don't leave your scarf behind. I took a scalding sip of my coffee, letting the heat fortify my resolve. Back at my desk, I buried myself in work, the hours blurring into a silent rhythm of emails and scheduling. My stomach rumbled, but I was too intimidated to leave, too new to dare take a proper lunch break. It was almost 5 when the intercom on my desk chimed again, making me jump. It was her voice. "Ms. Cohen," Serafina said. "Yes, Miss Sterling, I replied, my voice crisp. I've taken the liberty of ordering lunch. It should be arriving shortly. Oh, I said, surprised. Thank you, Miss Sterling. That's very kind, but you didn't have to. She cut me off, her voice smooth as silk. It's from the little Italian place on 4th, the one with the spicy arrabbiata soup you were looking at on your monitor earlier. I froze. My blood ran cold, then hot. How could she have known that? I had only glanced at the menu for a fleeting second an hour ago. Was she watching my screen? Was it a reflection in the glass wall of her office? The thought that she was observing me with that level of minute detail was both terrifying and something else. Something I refused to name. 20 minutes later, a delivery arrived. I brought the bag to her door, which slid open as I approached. Your lunch, Miss Sterling, I said, holding the bag. She looked up from her work, and for the first time the corners of her lips tilted upwards in a tiny, almost smile. That one's yours, Leah, she said softly. The sound of my first name in her voice was a physical shock. Mine's on my desk, thank you. I retreated to my own desk, my legs feeling unsteady. I unpacked the container. The rich, spicy scent of the tomato soup filled the air. It wasn't just lunch. It was a piece of information. A signal. It said, I see you. I notice things. I noticed you didn't eat. I was a ghost hunter, sent to the apex to learn the stories of the PAs who had failed before me. The problem was, as I sat there, eating the soup my untouchable boss had ordered for me, I had a feeling that I didn't want to be the one who learned the lesson. I wanted to be the one who stayed long enough to become a ghost herself. By the 3rd week, I understood something important about Serafina Sterling. She didn't run her company like a place people worked. She ran it like a place people performed, quietly, perfectly. Like every hallway, every calendar invite, every decision had a hidden audience. Sterling Industries was her father's legacy, yes, but it had become her empire. The kind of empire that didn't just expand. It swallowed competitors whole and left no evidence behind. People spoke about her like she was a myth dressed in a tailored suit. They admired her. They feared her. They loved her from a distance because distance was the only place she ever let anyone exist. And somehow, I had been hired to stand closest. Every day, at my desk felt like sitting outside a storm. Calm skies, but I could feel the thunder waiting somewhere behind the glass. I became fluent in her patterns. The way her mornings started sharp and silent. The way she read emails like she was dissecting them. The way she didn't waste words, because words, to her, were currency. I also became fluent in the building's obsession with her. It wasn't subtle, it never was. There were the women on the 24th floor who would accidentally appear near the executive elevators at the exact time Serafina arrived. The interns who smiled too hard and laughed too quickly whenever she passed. The senior managers who pretended they weren't competing for her approval the way hungry people compete for food. Then there were the whispers, always in corners, always in elevators, always said like confessions. She never keeps an assistant for long. They fall for her. She acts like she doesn't notice. She always notices. That last one, I believed. Because Serafina Sterling noticed everything. It was there in the way she'd glance at the time and then, precisely 2 minutes later, her driver would pull up. It was there in the way she'd walk into a room and somehow know who had lied in the last meeting without needing proof. And it was there in the most dangerous thing of all, the way she never once made me feel invisible. Even when she didn't look at me, I felt her awareness like a hand at the back of my neck. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself this job would be a triumph, a stepping stone, a career-making move. But in the quiet moments, when my screen dimmed and the office lights reflected faintly off the glass doors of her office, I would catch myself wondering things I had no right to wonder. What does she look like when she laughs for real? Does she ever get tired of being perfect? Does she ever miss being touched like a person, instead of approached like a prize? And every time those thoughts surfaced, I'd swallow them down with bitter coffee and discipline. Because women like Serafina Sterling didn't come with happy endings. They came with NDAs. That Friday, the apex floor smelled faintly of espresso and polished wood. Quarterly board meeting. Even saying it in my head made my spine straighten. The board wasn't there to learn anything. They were there to measure her, to check for cracks, to see if the woman who had multiplied Sterling Industries tenfold was still the unstoppable force they'd reluctantly grown dependent on. They didn't trust her because she was young when she took over. They didn't trust her because she was a woman, And they definitely didn't trust her because she had made them all rich, while making them feel irrelevant. Power does that. It creates resentment, the way heat creates sweat. Serafina had been in her office since early morning. I knew because her first calendar change happened at 6:12 a.m. Her handwriting, yes, she still handwrote certain notes, was already on the file folders I'd arranged exactly the way she liked. Alignment so clean it looked almost unnatural. At 9:47 the doors to her office slid open. No announcement, no drama. She simply appeared. I didn't look up immediately. I'd learned that looking up too quickly felt like eagerness, and eagerness in this place was a weakness you could smell. But I felt her. Her steps were quiet, controlled. She walked like she never had to rush because the world would wait for her. "Ms. Cohen," she said. Not Leah, never Leah. Just Ms. Cohen. Like a line drawn neatly between us. "Yes, Miss Sterling. Board materials." I stood, passed her the folder. 2 copies, 1 backup, tabs in the right order, and she took it without a word. Her fingers brushed the edge of mine for half a second. Accidental, probably. My whole body reacted like it had been instructed to. She didn't even pause. She walked into the conference room with the folder in her hand like she was about to sign someone's fate. And I followed behind, because that was my job. The board filed in like a slow parade of entitlement. Expensive cologne, heavy watches, forced smiles. Men who spoke to her like they'd known her father and therefore assumed they owned a piece of her too. They greeted her. She greeted them. She never stood to shake hands. They all leaned slightly toward her without meaning to. That was Serafina's gravity. I stood at the side near the media console, my posture straight, my attention split between the room and the presentation system I had checked 3 times already. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't. Midway through her 3rd slide, right when her voice had that calm, lethal confidence that made people unconsciously sit straighter, the screen behind her flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went blue. A harsh blue. The kind that looks like failure. Silence struck the room like a slap. One of the board members shifted in his seat, satisfied. Not surprised. Satisfied. Like he'd been waiting for the universe to prove something. Serafina didn't move. She didn't blink too fast. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't turn around in a panic, like someone who had lost control. She simply paused long enough to make the silence hers. Then calmly, she looked at the board, and smiled, just slightly. A smile that didn't ask for patience. A smile that implied they were lucky she was allowing them to witness a minor inconvenience. And she said, evenly, "Give me a moment. No apology, no explanation, just ownership of the room." My chest locked. I was already moving before I realized I'd decided. Because if that screen stayed blue for more than 10 seconds, they would smell blood. They didn't need much. They just needed a small crack to press their thumbs into. I knelt at the console, fingers moving fast. But the system wouldn't reboot. It wouldn't respond. It was dead. That shouldn't have been possible. Except, someone wanted it to be. My heart hammered. My palms slicked. And then I remembered the hard drive in my bag. The backup I'd made because I couldn't shake the feeling that perfection always attracts sabotage. I slipped it out, plugged it in, bypassed the main server, and rerouted the input. 30 seconds. Maybe less. But with the board watching, 30 seconds feels like a lifetime. I stood, remote in my hand, and approached Serafina's side. I didn't speak. Speaking would make it seem like we were scrambling. I simply held out the remote, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like this was how it was always meant to happen. Serafina's gaze dropped to my hand, then her eyes lifted to my face, and for one sharp second, I felt it. Her attention. Full. Undivided. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't warmth. It was assessment. Like I'd just done something that forced her to recategorize me. She took the remote from my hand without touching my fingers this time. Then she turned back to the board and clicked. The screen lit up, perfectly. Her slide resumed as if it had never failed. She didn't even reference the interruption again. Not even once. She simply continued, her voice steady, her points brutal and clean, like she'd planned the whole thing just to remind them that she could survive chaos without flinching. I stepped back to my place, my pulse still wild. And that's when I realized, I wasn't the only one who understood what had just happened. The board had noticed. Their eyes kept flicking toward me, not with admiration, but with calculation. Because anyone who could protect Serafina Sterling's control in real time was no longer just an assistant. I was leverage. And leverage, in this building, came with consequences. When the meeting ended, the board rose slowly, gathering their things with forced ease. A few of them offered compliments the way people offer coins, small, insincere, and meant to be remembered later. Serafina accepted them all with a nod. No smile, no softness. They filed out. The room emptied. The door shut behind the last one. Silence returned. I stood near the console, forcing my breathing to calm down, trying to reassemble the professional mask I'd dropped for those frantic seconds. I could feel her behind me before she spoke. Ms. Cohen. Yes, Ms. Sterling. Walk with me. Not a request. My stomach dipped. I followed her out of the conference room and into the corridor. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. The apex hallway was all glass and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. She stopped near the tall windows overlooking the city. She didn't turn to face me immediately. She looked out at the skyline like she owned it. And then she said, almost casually, "You made a backup." It wasn't a question. I swallowed. Yes. A pause. Then. Why? Because I was afraid you'd fail? Because I was afraid they'd tear you apart? Because I couldn't bear the thought of watching you stand there while men like that smiled at your discomfort? None of those were safe answers, so I chose the only one that wouldn't get me dismissed. I was instructed to anticipate needs, I said, even the ones that shouldn't exist. She finally turned her head, just enough to look at me from the side. That look, God. It wasn't kind, it wasn't cruel, it was something more dangerous than both. Interest. You don't panic, she said softly. It sounded like an observation, but it landed like a verdict. I do, I admitted, keeping my voice controlled. I just don't let it show. The faintest curve touched her mouth, not a smile. Something smaller, like she approved. Then she stepped closer, not too close, just close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence. Close enough that my breath started misbehaving. And then she lifted her hand and placed it on my shoulder, deliberately, firmly, not gentle, not hesitant, like she'd done it 1,000 times, and she was doing it now, because she wanted to. Her fingers rested there like a promise I didn't deserve. My whole body went still, and I hated myself for it, because she could feel the reaction under her palm, could feel the way my muscles tightened, could feel the way my pulse betrayed me. I didn't look away, I couldn't. Serafina watched my face closely, her eyes moving over me like she was reading a report only she had clearance to access. And she didn't look weirded out, she didn't look conflicted, she looked satisfied. Like she'd pressed exactly where she meant to press and got exactly the result she expected. Because of course she did. Women fell for her all the time. It wasn't new to her. What was new was me trying not to. She let the silence stretch, let it pull. Then, without moving her hand, she said, "You're doing well." 2 seconds, 3, then she removed her hand. Slowly, and that slow removal felt like being dismissed from a dream you didn't ask to enter. She started walking again, already finished with the moment. But I was still standing there, trying to remember what breathing felt like. "Your access has been updated," she said as she walked. "You'll have clearance to the executive server and conference systems going forward." I blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you, Miss Sterling." She didn't look back. And then, like the universe wanted to punish me for thinking that praise meant safety, she added coolly, "I don't like being surprised twice." My throat tightened. That was the sweetness, wasn't it? She'd rewarded me with one hand and warned me with the other. Approval, wrapped in pressure. A compliment that came with a blade, because if she liked me, if I'd become valuable, then I'd also become a risk. And Serafina Sterling didn't keep risks close unless she was confident she could control them. I returned to my desk with my shoulder still tingling, my mind loud with questions that had no place in a professional setting. But one thought rose above all the others, terrifying in its clarity. If this was what she did when she wasn't interested, what would she do when she finally was? By Monday, the apex floor looked the way it always looked. Clean lines, quiet air, a view that made you forget there were people struggling down on the streets below. Up here, everything was controlled. Except me. I was halfway through sorting Serafina's day, calls, contracts, internal reviews, a late lunch meeting she would probably ignore, when the private elevator chimed. That elevator didn't chime for just anyone. I glanced up automatically, then forced myself to look back down at my tablet, pretending I was busy. Pretending my curiosity wasn't immediate and alive. The doors opened, and the air changed. Some people enter a room and you register them the way you register furniture. Others enter and you feel them in your skin. Her heels clicked confidently toward my desk, unhurried, like she didn't have to announce herself because the building already knew her. I waited 2 beats, then looked up. She was breathtaking. Not in the polished, distant way Serafina was breathtaking. This was different. This was warm beauty, close beauty, the kind that makes you think of laughter, and late nights, and hands tangled in sheets. She wore a cream-colored coat that looked expensive because everything about her looked expensive. Her hair fell in glossy waves that framed her face like she had never had a hard day in her life. And her smile looked like trouble that never apologized. She leaned on the edge of my desk with the ease of someone who had done it before. "I'm looking for the woman who runs this place," she said. It wasn't a question. And that told me everything. "Miss Sterling is in a meeting," I replied politely. The woman's eyes flicked over me, slowly, deliberately, like she was tasting a new flavor. "Of course she is," she murmured, and then she tilted her head. "You're new." "Yes," I said carefully. "Leah Cohen. I'm Miss Sterling's PA." The woman's brows rose slightly, as if she liked the sound of that. "I'm Jade Maxwell," she said, like her name should mean something to me. It did. It hit a memory from HR paperwork, an emergency contact list, and a few casual mentions I'd overheard from the executive floor. Jade Maxwell, Serafina's best friend. Jade's gaze lingered. Not rude, not obvious, just a fraction longer than polite. Like she was filing me away in her mind for later. Like she was noting the details that mattered. Composure, posture, the fact that I didn't fidget or over-smile. Jade said softly, as if thinking out loud. "So you're the one." "I'm sorry," I asked. Jade's smile deepened, but she didn't explain. She straightened from my desk and glanced towards Serafina's office doors. "Tell her I'm here," she said, casual as a queen. "She'll make time." It wasn't arrogance exactly. It was history. "I can let her know as soon as she's free," I replied. Jade gave a small, amused laugh. Not at me, at the system, at the idea of waiting. Then she returned her gaze to me, voice lower. "You'll do fine up here, Leah. Just don't mistake proximity for permission." The words were soft, almost kind, but they landed like a warning. Before I could respond, the frosted doors down the hall shifted. The meeting was ending. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too loudly. Instinct told me to become invisible. Serafina appeared at the corridor's mouth in black. Of course she was in black. Moving with that calm, terrifying precision that made the world feel slightly less stable around her. 2 men trailed behind her, still talking, still trying to hold on to her attention like it was a lifeline. Serafina ended them with a handshake and a single sentence that sounded like closure. They left quickly, grateful. Then Serafina's eyes found Jade. She didn't look at me, not even once. Her gaze locked on her best friend like Jade was the only interruption worthy of her attention. Serafina stopped in front of Jade, her expression perfectly controlled. "Don't," she said. Just that. Jade's brows lifted slightly, amused, as if she'd been waiting to hear it. Serafina stepped closer, voice dropping, soft, velvet, lethal. "Don't you dare," she said. Jade laughed under her breath, not apologetic, not intimidated. She didn't argue in front of me, she didn't need to. Her smile said enough. "You can try to stop me, Sarah. I might even let you." Serafina tilted her chin toward her office. "Get in here." Jade pushed off my desk like she owned the air, then followed Serafina inside, still smiling. The doors slid shut, and the quiet that followed felt personal. I sat down slowly, but my mind didn't return to the schedule on my tablet. It went to the softness in Serafina's voice. Not soft like tenderness, soft like control. I wondered what it felt like to be on the other side of that voice with no title between you and her. No rules, no desk, no glass. And then because my thoughts had become dangerous lately, I wondered what it would feel like if Serafina ever said my name like that. Leah, not Miss Cohen, not a role, just me. The doors opened again several minutes later. Serafina stepped out first, composed, perfect. Like she hadn't just said something that made the air vibrate. Jade followed, still wearing that warm, troublemaking smile. Serafina came straight to my desk. Her gaze stayed on my tablet, not my face. "Clear my afternoon," she said. My throat tightened. "Yes, Miss Sterling. And have the driver move the car around." "Yes, Miss Sterling." Only then did Serafina turn away. Jade lingered behind, her eyes returning to me with that same calm curiosity. Only now it carried a little more confidence, like Serafina's warning had made the game more interesting, not less. "I'll see you around, Leah," Jade said. The way she said my name, like it already belonged on her tongue, sent an unwanted shiver through me. Serafina stopped. She turned her head just enough to look at Jade. The look she gave her wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was sharp, piercing, intimate in the way only old power could be intimate. Jade's smile only widened. Serafina said nothing. She simply reached out, closed her hand around Jade's wrist, and pulled her toward the elevator, with a calm firmness that didn't ask permission. Not a lover's touch, not a friend's touch, a mine, move touch. Jade let herself be taken, laughing quietly as if she enjoyed every second of Serafina losing patience. The elevator doors opened. Serafina pulled Jade inside, then stepped in after her. And in the last second before the doors slid shut, I saw Serafina's profile. Cool, controlled, unyielding. I didn't know what had happened behind the frosted glass, but my body reacted anyway, because my mind did the one thing I didn't want it to do. It replaced Jade with me. I imagined Serafina's fingers around my wrist, her voice low, telling me what to do. Not because I was her assistant, because she wanted me close enough to command. And then, because longing has a cruel sense of humor, another thought followed. I didn't want to be her best friend. I wanted to be someone she looked at separately, with desire. The elevator chimed again later that afternoon, and this time the air didn't change warmly. It went cold. A woman stepped out. Elegant, expensive, composed to the bone. Her presence had the quiet authority of someone who had walked these halls before I ever existed in them. She didn't pause at my desk. She walked past me as if I was a detail too small to register. I stood quickly, professional instinct snapping me into motion, and followed her. "Ma'am," I said gently. "Miss Sterling isn't available. She took the afternoon out." The woman stopped with precision, then turned her head slightly toward me. "She's with Jade," she said. Not a question, a statement dressed like one. I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, because I shouldn't. Instead, I steadied my voice and asked, "May I ask who I should tell her came by?" The woman's gaze settled on me for the first time, cool and unhurried. And then she said simply, "Her wife." The word hit me in the chest. Wife, not ex-wife, not soon-to-be. Wife. "Tell Serafina I was here," she continued, "and tell her to call me." Then she turned and walked back into the elevator without another glance. When she was gone, the apex felt too big, too bright, too quiet. I returned to my desk and stared at Serafina's office doors for a long moment before I picked up the phone and called her. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. "Miss Sterling," I said, "your wife came by. She asked that you call her." A pause. Long enough for my heartbeat to become something I could hear. Then Serafina's voice came through, calm and unreadable. "Thank you, Ms. Cohen." And the line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. My thoughts were a mess I didn't have permission to clean up, because now there was a wife, a best friend, a divorce that wouldn't end, and me, standing in the middle of it, falling for a woman who didn't need drama, and therefore would never make it easy on the person she liked. Which meant that if Serafina Sterling ever did turn her attention toward me, it wouldn't feel like safety. It would feel like a storm choosing where to land.